I've lived with my dad for as long as I can remember. Mom died when I was really young, I was barely 4 years old. The house we lived in belonged to my grandparents, Mom's parents. After Mom died, Dad didn't date for a long time. Sure, there were a few women here and there when I was around 12, but nothing serious. Just coffee dates and occasional dinners out while I stayed with a babysitter. None of them ever came to our house, and Dad never seemed particularly excited about any of them. Everything changed when I turned 14. By then, both my grandparents had passed away too, and it was just Dad and me in that big house. That's when he met Sandra. "Ruby, honey, I want you to meet someone special," Dad said one evening. He had this nervous smile on his face that I'd never seen before. "This is Sandra." Sandra was tall and elegant, with perfectly styled blonde hair and manicured nails. But what caught my attention were the two people standing behind her, her kids. "These are my children," Sandra said with a practiced smile. "James is in his first year of college, and this is Melissa, she's 16. James barely looked at me, too busy texting on his phone. Melissa, though, she made eye contact all right. Later that same day, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Look," she said, crossing her arms. "Just because our parents are dating doesn't make us sisters or friends or whatever. Let's keep our distance, okay?" Things moved fast after that. Within 6 months, Dad and Sandra were married, and they all moved into our house. It was weird how quickly our spacious home suddenly felt cramped. James took over the guest room, Melissa got the study that we converted into a bedroom, and Sandra's stuff seemed to multiply overnight, filling every available space. The bathroom situation became a nightmare. Either Sandra was in there doing her hour-long beauty routine, or Melissa was hogging it for her endless selfie sessions. I started waking up an hour earlier, just to make sure I could shower before school. But I didn't complain. Not when I saw how Dad's face lit up every time Sandra walked into the room. Not when he started humming while making breakfast, or when he actually started leaving work on time to have dinner with all of us. He was happy, really, genuinely happy, for the first time since Mom died. Everything changed when Dad got his big promotion. He came home one evening, practically bouncing with excitement, his tie loose around his neck and a huge grin on his face. "Regional Sales Director," he announced during dinner. "Can you believe it?" Sandra immediately started talking about buying a new car and renovating the kitchen, but I was stuck on the part where Dad mentioned extensive travel. Turned out extensive meant he'd be gone for weeks at a time, sometimes even a month. The first time Dad left for a business trip, the change in Sandra was like a switch being flipped. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, she turned to me with this look I'd never seen before. "Ruby," she said, her voice stern. "We need to establish some ground rules while your father is away." Those ground rules turned out to be a long list of chores and restrictions. I had to be home by 4:30 p.m. sharp, no exceptions. Not even for study groups or school activities. "But I have volleyball practice on Thursdays," I protested. "Then you'll have to quit," Sandra replied without missing a beat. "Someone needs to help with dinner and housework." The first few days were rough. I'd rush home from school, barely having time to catch my breath, before Sandra started barking orders. "The floors need mopping, Ruby. These windows are filthy, Ruby. Start chopping the vegetables for dinner, Ruby." Meanwhile, Melissa would sprawl on the couch, phone in hand, giggling at whatever her latest boyfriend had texted. James was rarely home, but when he was, he'd leave his dishes in the sink and his laundry for someone else to do. One evening, while scrubbing pots while Melissa watched TikTok videos at full volume, I finally spoke up. "Why doesn't Melissa have to help with any of this?" Sandra's head snapped up from her magazine. "Melissa needs to focus on her college preparations. She can't waste time on housework." "But she's just what?" Sandra's voice had that dangerous edge to it. I glanced at Melissa, who was now filming herself doing some dance trend, definitely not studying. "Nothing," I mumbled, turning back to the dishes. The worst part wasn't even the endless chores or the unfair treatment. It was how Sandra would completely transform whenever Dad called or came home. She'd put on this exhausted act, slumping in her chair and sighing dramatically. "Oh, honey, you have no idea how hard it's been," she'd say when Dad walked through the door. "Managing the house all by myself, taking care of everything." And Dad, sweet, oblivious Dad, would kiss her forehead and pull out some gift he'd bought during his trip, a designer handbag, expensive perfume, or jewelry that probably cost more than all my belongings combined. "You're such a trooper," he'd say, while she preened and showed off her latest present to Melissa. "I don't know what we'd do without you." I'd stand there in the background, my hands raw from cleaning, homework still waiting to be done, watching this performance play out. Sometimes I caught Melissa smirking at me from behind her phone, but I kept my mouth shut. What was the point of saying anything? Dad was happy, successful, and in love. The years crawled by, and before I knew it, I was in my senior year of high school. James had graduated college 2 years ago, but was still living at home, claiming he was looking for the right opportunity. Mostly this meant playing video games in his room and occasionally going on interviews that mysteriously never worked out. Melissa was in her 3rd year at the local college, which meant she too was still at home, maintaining her reign over the bathroom and continuing her tradition of never lifting a finger to help. My 18th birthday came around in early spring. I didn't expect much. Sandra had made it clear that excessive celebration wasn't necessary. "We'll just have a small family dinner," she announced, not bothering to look up from her phone. "No need to waste money on a big party." I tried not to think about Melissa's 18th birthday 2 years ago. That had been a whole different story, a rented venue, professional catering, DJ, and about 100 guests. Sandra had spent weeks planning it, making sure every detail was perfect. Dad was home for my birthday dinner at least, though he left for another business trip the next day. "Sorry, princess," he said, hugging me goodbye. "Duty calls. We'll celebrate properly when I get back." I focused on graduation prep after that, finalizing college applications, ordering my cap and gown, the usual senior year stuff. Everything seemed normal until that dinner, about a week after Dad left. We were all sitting around the table, me, Sandra, James, and Melissa. I was pushing my peas around my plate, trying to tune out Melissa's endless chatter about her latest drama with her boyfriend, when Sandra cleared her throat. "Ruby," she said, folding her hands on the table. "We need to have a serious conversation." I perked up, thinking maybe she wanted to discuss college plans. I'd been avoiding the topic with her, but maybe she was finally showing some interest in my future. "Now that you're 18, she continued, her voice syrupy sweet, "you're legally an adult. And adults have responsibilities. Starting next month, you'll need to pay rent. $500 per month seems fair." I literally choked on my mouthful of food. James thumped me on the back, looking amused. I looked around the table. James and Melissa were both smirking, clearly enjoying the show. "And what happens if I can't pay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Sandra's smile widened. "Well, then you'll need to find somewhere else to live, won't you? We can't have freeloaders in this house." I sat at the dinner table, my food now completely cold, as Sandra's words hung in the air. The unfairness of it all, the years of being treated like a servant while her children lounged around, and now this, something inside me finally snapped. "So let me get this straight," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "James, who graduated college 2 years ago and spends his days playing video games, doesn't have to pay rent. Melissa, who's in her 3rd year of college and has never done a single chore in this house, also doesn't have to pay rent. But I do? I've made the decision that my children don't need to pay rent while they're getting established," Sandra replied, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. A strange sort of calm came over me then. Maybe it was all the years of bottled-up frustration, or maybe it was just time for the truth to come out. I felt myself smile, not my usual attempt to keep the peace smile, but something different, something that made Sandra's own smile falter slightly. "Well, that's interesting," I said, leaning back in my chair. I won't be paying rent because this is my house. The silence that followed was deafening. Then James started laughing, followed by Melissa's high-pitched giggle. Sandra joined in too, but her laugh had an edge to it. "What are you talking about?" she asked between chuckles. "This house belongs to me," I repeated, not breaking eye contact. "My grandparents put it in my name before they died." The laughter died as they took in my expression. Sandra's face went through a series of emotions: amusement, confusion, disbelief, and finally, something close to panic. "That's ridiculous," she spluttered, reaching for her phone. "I'm calling your father right now." Her manicured nails tapped aggressively at the screen as she put the phone on speaker. The dial tone seemed to echo through the kitchen. "Hello?" Dad's voice crackled through the speaker. "David," Sandra's voice was tight, controlled. "Ruby is telling some interesting stories about the house. She claims it belongs to her." "That's not true, right?" The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like forever. "David?" Sandra's voice rose slightly. "Well," Dad cleared his throat. "Actually, my in-laws put it in Ruby's name before they passed." "I didn't think." "You didn't think to mention this?" Sandra was practically screeching now. "How could you not tell me this?" "I didn't think it was important," Dad said weakly. "It never seemed relevant." "Not relevant?" Sandra's face was turning an interesting shade of red. "Not relevant that your teenage daughter owns our house?" She hung up before Dad could respond, nearly throwing her phone onto the table. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. James and Melissa were staring at me like they'd never seen me before. Sandra took several deep breaths, visibly trying to compose herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was artificially bright, though I could hear it trembling slightly. "Well," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded more like a hiccup. "This has all been a big misunderstanding. Of course you don't need to pay rent, Ruby. Let's just forget this whole conversation happened, shall we?" I'd lost my appetite completely. Without a word, I stood up and left the kitchen, heading for the stairs. As I climbed to the second floor, I could hear urgent whispers coming from below, Sandra's harsh whispers mixing with James and Melissa's agitated voices. By 6 the next morning, I was already awake, staring at my ceiling and thinking about how everything had changed in just a few hours. Around 7, I heard movement downstairs, the familiar sound of Sandra making her morning coffee. I was about to head down for breakfast when I heard her voice floating up from the living room. She was on the phone, her tone hushed but intense. "David, you need to do something about this situation," she was saying. "Your daughter can't just. We need to get her to leave." I froze on the stairs, holding my breath to hear better. "I know it's her house, David," Sandra continued, frustration evident in her voice. "But she's making things difficult. She doesn't fit in here anymore. She's becoming a problem." There was a pause while Dad spoke. Even from where I stood, I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "But Sandra, it is her house. I can't just kick her out." "Nobody's talking about kicking her out." Sandra's voice took on that syrupy sweet tone she used when she was manipulating someone. "We just need to guide her in the right direction." "What about those colleges she applied to? The ones in other states? You could encourage her to go to one of those. Tell her it would be good for her independence." My stomach clenched as I heard Dad's response, "Maybe you're right. I'll talk to her about moving away for college. It might be better for everyone." I waited until Sandra hung up before walking into the kitchen, keeping my face carefully neutral. I busied myself with getting a bowl and some cereal, pretending I hadn't heard anything. James and Melissa shuffled in shortly after, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Sandra swept in last, her phone still in hand. "Good morning, everyone," she said brightly, as if last night had never happened. We all sat there, the only sound the crunching of cereal and the occasional clink of spoons against bowls. And then, as casually as if I was commenting on the weather, I said, "By the way, starting next month, you'll all need to start paying rent." Sandra's piece of toast stopped halfway to her mouth. James dropped his phone into his cereal bowl. Melissa's spoon clattered against her bowl. "Excuse me?" Sandra's voice was barely a whisper. "Rent," I repeated, taking another bite of my cereal. "I'm thinking, $500 per person seems fair. That's what adults do, right? They pay their own way?" Sandra's face had gone pale, then red. She coughed, clearly having inhaled some of her coffee. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious." But we're family," Sandra sputtered, her composure cracking. "Family doesn't charge family rent." That's not how things work." "Wasn't it you who just yesterday demanded that I pay rent?" I asked, still maintaining my calm demeanor as I stirred my cereal. Sandra's face flushed. She set her coffee cup down with a sharp click against the table. That was different. I was trying to teach you about financial literacy. To prepare you for the real world." I couldn't help but laugh at that. Financial literacy? The real world? That's interesting coming from someone who's been living rent-free in someone else's house for 4 years. "Now listen here," James started, but I cut him off. "No, you listen. You graduated college 2 years ago. You don't have a job. You spend all day playing video games and eating food that I help pay for with my part-time job. Maybe it's time for you to learn about financial literacy too." I turned to Melissa. "And you? When was the last time you even did your own laundry?" "How dare you?" Sandra's voice was rising. "After everything I'd done for this family." "What exactly have you done?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Made me do all the housework while your kids did nothing? Tried to charge me rent for my own house? Plotted with Dad this morning to try to get rid of me?" Her eyes widened. You were listening?" "I heard everything," I confirmed, pushing my bowl away. "And you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe it is time for some changes around here. So here are your options: either start paying rent, all of you, or find somewhere else to live." Sandra's face turned an alarming shade of red. This is revenge. You're just a spiteful, cruel child who's jealous of my children." "Paying rent?" Melissa scoffed, finally finding her voice. "Or what? Are you going to kick us out of the house?" "You ungrateful little brat." James joined in, standing up so fast his chair fell backward. "After we welcomed you into our family." "Your family?" I kept my voice level, even as they all started shouting. "This is my house. My grandparents' house. You're the ones who moved in here, remember? You'll regret this," Sandra hissed, pushing away from the table. "You have no idea what you're doing. James, Melissa, pack your things. We're leaving." I watched in silence as they stormed off, thundering up the stairs. Sandra paused at the doorway, turning back to me with eyes full of venom. "You'll pay for this," she spat. "Your father will hear about everything." I just sat there, finishing my now soggy cereal, as the sound of drawers slamming and angry muttering filtered down from upstairs. Within an hour, they had thrown some bags together and were stomping out the front door. Sandra didn't even bother closing it behind her, just stormed out to her car with James and Melissa in tow. The house felt strange in its newfound silence. I wandered from room to room, straightening things they'd left askew in their hurried departure, trying to process everything that had happened. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that my phone rang. Dad's name flashed across the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello? What the hell do you think you're doing?" Dad's voice exploded through the speaker. I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Sandra just called me in hysterics. How could you be so cruel?" Something inside me snapped. After years of trying to keep the peace, of staying quiet, of being the good daughter, I'd had enough. "Cruel?" I cut him off mid-rant. "That's interesting, Dad. Where was all this concern about cruelty when your wife tried to charge me rent for living in my own house? Did you think that was kind?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Dad spoke again, his voice was quieter, uncertain. What are you talking about? Sandra, never. Don't. My voice was shaking now. Don't you dare pretend you didn't know. I heard you on the phone with her this morning, Dad. When she was trying to convince you to make me move out, and you agreed to it. Remember that conversation? The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically see him squirming, the way he always did when caught in a lie. Ruby, honey, you don't understand. He seemed to gather himself, and suddenly his voice hardened again. You're destroying this family, Ruby. Is that what you want? Sandra is threatening to divorce me over this. I sank down onto the couch, the same couch where Melissa used to sprawl for hours while I did her share of the housework. She says she'll divorce you unless I apologize? For what? For owning my own house? For standing up for myself? She's my wife, Dad's voice cracked. She says either you apologize for how you treated her and her children, or she's leaving me. Is that what you want? To ruin my marriage? I looked around the living room, at the photos on the walls, mostly of Sandra's family now, with just one small picture of Mom still tucked away in the corner. When I spoke again, my voice was steady. I'm not apologizing, Dad. Not for this. The line went dead, he'd hung up on me. My graduation day came and went like a blur. The ceremony was beautiful, but the empty seats in the family section felt like a physical weight on my chest. My best friend Sarah's parents took photos of us together and invited me to their celebration dinner. They didn't mention the obvious absence of my family, but their hugs lasted a little longer than usual. I spent the next couple of days sorting through college acceptance letters and trying to figure out my next steps. The house felt both empty and peaceful, until a familiar car pulled into the driveway one afternoon. Dad got out first, followed by Sandra, James, and Melissa. They looked like they were headed to a business meeting rather than visiting family, all dressed up and wearing identical stern expressions. I met them at the door before they could knock. Ruby, Dad said, his voice formal. Sandra stood just behind his shoulder, nodding encouragingly like he was a puppet and she was pulling the strings. We've come to resolve this situation. I leaned against the doorframe, waiting. I'm willing to forgive your recent behavior, he continued, choosing his words carefully. We can all move back in and things can go back to normal. But you need to apologize to Sandra and her children for how you treated them, and of course, drop this ridiculous idea about rent. I looked at each of their faces, Dad's forced smile, Sandra's smug expression, James and Melissa's matching sneers. For years of memories flashed through my mind, countless nights of doing their chores, being treated like a servant, watching Dad slowly turn into someone I barely recognized. No, I said simply. Dad's facade cracked. Then you leave me no choice. If you can't be reasonable about this, if you can't be part of this family, then I'm done. I'm leaving, and I'm disowning you. Is that what you want? I felt oddly calm as I replied, that's your choice, Dad. You've made it clear who you choose, your wife and her children over your own daughter. Just like you've been doing for years. Sandra gasped dramatically. How dare you? You ungrateful little witch. You've always been jealous of my children, always trying to come between us and your father. One more word, I cut her off, pulling out my phone, and I'm calling the police for harassment. Your choice. The threat of police involvement shut her up fast. Dad started gathering the few belongings he'd left behind, working in tense silence. No one spoke as he packed his things into boxes, as he carried them to the car, as he made his final trip through the house where he'd raised me. He didn't say goodbye. Neither did any of them. They just got in their car and drove away, leaving nothing but tire tracks in the driveway. That was 3 months ago. I'm writing this from my dorm room at Northwestern University, over 1,000 miles from home. The house is being managed by Anderson Real Estate. They found good tenants, a young family with 2 little girls. The rental income more than covers my college expenses and lets me focus on my studies without worrying about money. I hear bits and pieces about Dad through mutual friends. He's renting a 3-bedroom apartment across town, still at his job with the fancy title and good salary. Sandra got the renovation she always wanted, new granite countertops and stainless steel appliances in someone else's kitchen. James finally found a job, though I hear he still lives at home. Melissa dropped out of college, but started a fashion blog. They're living their lives, and I'm living mine. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I look at old photos from before Mom died. Back when Dad's smile reached his eyes, and family meant something different. I wonder if we'll ever find our way back to being father and daughter again. I wonder if he ever thinks about me, if he regrets his choices, if he misses me like I sometimes miss him. Maybe someday Dad will realize what he lost. Maybe we'll find a way to rebuild what broke between us. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I know now that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible.
It's gotten late because work dragged on. I should head home soon. It was late at night and I was walking home quickly. Walking alone on a deserted street at night is dangerous. I need to get home quickly. Just as I was thinking this, a dull pain suddenly struck my back. As I fell, I managed to catch a glimpse of the perpetrator, a woman holding a metal bat and glaring at me. Despite the darkness, her flashy attire was unmistakable. I had been wary of strange men, never expecting to be attacked by a woman. I was shocked. Being Ethan's wife is unforgivable. The one who truly loves Ethan is me. Ethan belongs to me. You should just disappear. While calling out my husband's name, the woman beat me mercilessly with the metal bat. I thought, what does that mean? I wanted to ask her many things. But repeated blows prevented me from even raising my voice. I fell to the ground in pain, my consciousness fading. When I regained consciousness, the woman was gone. And dawn had broken while I lay on the ground. As I stood up, intense pain coursed through my body. Blood dripped onto the ground. Holding my head in pain, my palm came away covered in blood. I realized I was bleeding from the head. I could smell the iron. I tried to call an ambulance with my smartphone. But unfortunately, the battery was dead. I thought, why now of all times? Looking around, I could see the law office where my husband, Ethan, worked. Despite trembling and staggering, I desperately dragged myself towards the law office. Fortunately, it was already open. Ethan must be there by now. I thought, that woman, she'll see what it means to mess with a lawyer's wife. With my husband's power, I'll make sure that woman gets what she deserves. If it's true that she and Ethan were in love, I'll confront Ethan looking like this. With that thought, I pushed myself to keep going. Finally, I stepped into the office. The lawyer who greeted me was shocked at the sight. No wonder, I was covered in blood. Call lawyer number 3189, my husband. I relayed the number Ethan had given me. You might want to call an ambulance. Just do it. Lawyer number 3189. I snapped, out of patience. The lawyer, looking confused, said, "There's no such registered lawyer." What, really? That couldn't be. Ethan definitely works at this law office. I've seen him going to work here. Yes. Besides, lawyer registration numbers now have 5 digits, not 4. Only lawyers registered over 50 years ago have a 4-digit registration number. That would mean they're quite elderly. Of course, Ethan isn't that old. He's still in his 30s. Even those registered over 50 years ago wouldn't have that number. The smallest number from the first training session in 1947 is 5251. No. I'm sure, that's what my husband told me. That can't be. Suddenly, my vision swayed and I collapsed again. I couldn't believe any of it. Was Ethan not really a lawyer? That can't be. My in-laws were proud of their lawyer son. I've seen his lawyer badge. He seemed to know quite a bit about the law. Maybe Ethan had mistakenly told me his lawyer number. Could that be? He had repeated 3189 so many times. With my head bleeding from the beating, coherent thought was impossible. My vision blurred. Are you all right? I'm calling an ambulance right now. Hello. I heard the lawyer calling for help as my consciousness drifted away. My name is Aaron Powell. My husband, Ethan Powell, is a lawyer. At least, that's what he has claimed since we met. We met on a dating app and quickly progressed to marriage. My friends envy me for having a lawyer husband, but I think it's awful. I'm a lawyer, you know. Are you going against me? He would say this arrogantly whenever he disliked something. He used to be so kind before we got married. He would often talk at length about how hard he worked to become the lawyer his parents wanted. But being a lawyer means you're making good money, right? People would say. But until recently, Ethan wasn't earning much. His income was almost like a janitor's. Apparently, he didn't have many clients. Being a lawyer wasn't as great as it seemed. Our marital relationship was not good, dominated by his arrogance. I was already regretting marrying Ethan. One day, Ethan started using social media as a handsome lawyer. He was quite good-looking. With his sharp rhetoric, he discussed legal issues, gender politics, and political correctness debates, quickly gaining followers. Though it seemed he was only echoing the majority opinion online, it appeared to be effective. Thanks to social media, Ethan's client base seemed to increase. His income improved. As work went well and his income increased, Ethan became kinder to me. And then, this happened. Now, I'm hospitalized and lying in a hospital bed. Of course, I got a medical report. It seems Ethan was informed. He messaged me saying, I heard you were suddenly attacked by a woman on the street at night. Tough break. I reported it to the police, and I felt relieved. Yet, Ethan hasn't visited me even once. Not a single message showing concern. Even when I send him messages on Messenger, I only get stickers or he leaves me on read. It's shocking, even if our marriage is strained. I thought, is he having a good time with that mistress right now? Lying alone in bed, I can't help but think about it. I want to believe that Ethan is worried about me. The one who truly loves Ethan is me. Ethan belongs to me. From that phrase, I think that woman must have been Ethan's mistress. I had been suspecting Ethan of cheating due to his recent strange behavior. It seems I was right about Ethan. I finally came home from the hospital and was able to face Ethan. Although the hospital advised me to stay longer, I had things I needed to verify and couldn't stand waiting any longer. Why didn't you visit me even once? You didn't even send me a message to check if I was okay. I was suddenly attacked on the street. As I confronted him, Ethan just gave a wry smile and said, Sorry. I was busy with work. You know, being a lawyer is a hectic job. Are you angry? Well, I'll buy you a cake to celebrate your discharge then. He tried to lighten the mood without showing any real concern. Even though I was still bandaged up. He didn't show any anger towards the person who attacked me either. Hey, aren't you angry at the person who did this to me? Of course I'm angry. But you weren't seriously harmed, so isn't that good enough? It was dangerous. Can't you use your lawyer's power to punish the perpetrator? What do you think a lawyer is? I can't just dish out punishments like in some satisfying drama. Leave it to the police. Maybe, but don't you care about me? I do care. But worrying won't heal your injuries. I wanted to ask Ethan about not being registered at the law office and his non-existent lawyer number, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Determined to uncover the truth, I went to the law firm where Ethan claimed to work. The first person to greet me was the lawyer who had called the ambulance for me. How are your injuries? While my husband hadn't shown any concern, this person did. Yes, thank you, I'm getting better. I'm glad to hear that. I was worried. No, I should apologize for the trouble last time. Really, thank you so much. How can I ever repay you? Here, this is a small gift. I hope you like it. Thank you, I'm really grateful. I apologize for the late introduction. My name is Matt Owen. Lawyer Owen said as he handed me his business card. His cleanliness and polite demeanor gave me a good impression. Thank you. My name is Aaron Powell. To get to the point, is my husband, Ethan Powell, really not a lawyer here? I heard he worked here. He even has a social media presence. Ethan Powell. Lawyer Owen, with a puzzled look, repeated the name I mentioned, and then turned pale the moment he saw Ethan's account on my smartphone. This man. Do you know something? Excuse me. Ma'am, this person does indeed work at this law office. For a moment, I thought maybe the lawyer number was just a mistake until Lawyer Owen continued. However, he is not a lawyer. He's a janitor at this law firm. What? A janitor. But he had a lawyer badge. He might have forged it, or maybe he found a badge that another lawyer lost. It's surprisingly common for them to lose things. Or perhaps he stole it. Anyway, thank you for telling me. Speaking as a lawyer, pretending to be one is a violation of the law and a crime. So, I'm sorry, but we can't overlook this and we will have to report it. Lawyer Owen looked apologetic as he spoke. Please wait. I don't mind the report, but actually, I've hired a detective agency to investigate if he's cheating on me. I was attacked by a woman who seems to be his mistress. So could you wait until the results come in? I'll report back as soon as I get them. Lawyer Owen seemed thoughtful. Understood. I specialize in divorce law. So if it comes to that with your husband, I'd be willing to help. Thank you for everything. I thanked him deeply, and Lawyer Owen nodded in return. The detective's results came quickly. As expected, Ethan was having an affair with that woman. During my hospitalization, it seems he had even let her stay at our house. Moreover, they had conversations like, I found that woman on the street at night and beat her up with a metal bat. Now no one will interfere with me and Ethan. Hey, don't go too far. What if you get caught? Such a bad woman. And well, it's easier without the nagging ugly wife. The mistress had hurriedly left the house when I returned home sooner than expected. However, the police investigation revealed even more shocking details. Ethan was indeed a fake lawyer. And the lawyer badge he had was one he found dropped in the office. Initially, he had only pretended to be a lawyer to impress others. But eventually, Ethan started engaging in fraudulent activities. Pretending to be a lawyer, he would get people to pay him retainer fees. Starting a social media was also part of his fraud scheme, luring victims. Engaging in debates about gender issues, politics, And political correctness online was just him getting carried away by internet arguments. But it also helped him in gathering victims. The reason for the increase in Ethan's income was, needless to say, due to the money transferred for his scams. I was happily oblivious, pleased that his income had increased and that he had become kinder. The mistress was also one of the victims deceived by him, entering into the relationship to potentially benefit from his influence. And as a result, she had been financially supporting Ethan lavishly. Lawyer Owen and I reported Ethan and his mistress to the police. It turned out that Ethan's claim of having reported my assault was a lie. He knew his mistress was the assailant and lied about reporting it to protect her. Ethan was arrested for violating lawyer regulations and fraud, and his mistress for assault. The metal bat used in the attack was seized, and my blood was collected from it. Ethan ranted, "I gave you a good life with the money I made. Don't report your husband just because you're jealous he cheated. Ungrateful wife. You bring such misfortune." It was complete resentment. I did not want any part of the money he earned through fraud. And it was only a matter of time before he would have been caught anyway. Naturally, I divorced Ethan and demanded compensation for adultery and assault from both him and his mistress. During this, Lawyer Owen was a great support. Thanks to him, I was able to secure far more in damages than usual, likely because the case involved both assault and fraud. The mistress claimed I was a victim of the fraud too. "Yet, you're not only reporting me but also taking compensation. That's cruel. I've already been swindled out of a lot of money by Ethan, and now I have none. Because of this, I've even been disowned by my family. Everyone is terrible. I'm a victim here. It's the wife's fault for not stopping her husband's fraud. It's only natural I hit her." Indeed, she might have been a victim of the fraud. However, what is she talking about after having committed adultery and assault? She is clearly also an offender. I have no obligation to forgive her. Moreover, the case she asked Ethan to handle involved her stealing from an acquaintance's home, so she was fully culpable. And there was no room for sympathy. The mistress had asked Ethan to settle the case cheaply and minimize the damage. And Ethan continued the affair, using this as leverage to extort money from her. I recalled that recently, cosmetics and jewelry had frequently gone missing from my possessions. Especially right after I was discharged from the hospital, many items were lost. According to the police, it was indeed the mistress who had stolen them, with Ethan's acquiescence. Ethan apparently didn't care about my belongings. Despite having been caught stealing once, her bad habits had not changed, including the case she had asked Ethan to handle. The mistress was also charged with theft. Naturally, I also demanded compensation for these losses. Ethan said the wife wasn't using them anymore, so he gave them to me. I'm not at fault. Even the case where she hit the wife with a metal bat, Ethan told me to do it. He said the wife was in the way. Then he persuaded me that it would work out in my favor. I'm not at fault. I was deceived by a con artist. I'm a victim. Punish that con man, not me. She's lying. I didn't know anything about her belongings being stolen. If I had known, I would have stopped it. I didn't know anything about the wife being beaten either. It was all that woman's doing. Please punish her alone. Ethan and his mistress tried to shift the blame onto each other during the police interrogation. Both were desperately trying to lighten their own sentences. Ethan's parents also visited him in detention, where a shocking truth emerged. His parents had also been deceived by Ethan's claim of being a lawyer. They had pressured him from a young age to become a lawyer. Despite his efforts and studying hard, Ethan failed the bar exam. Not wanting to disappoint his parents, he lied about passing the bar after starting work as a janitor at a law firm. Initially, he intended to make the lie true by continuing to take the bar exam. But after failing 5 times, he was barred from retaking it unless he passed a preliminary examination or completed a law school program, which he did not want to pursue. Unable to confess the truth to his parents, who praised him as the pride of the family, and having found a lawyer's badge in the office, he decided to continue the deception. Thus, I was also deceived. His knowledge of the law came from studying for the exams. Some of his stories about his struggles to become a lawyer were partly true. With his arrest and the ensuing media coverage, Ethan's life smeared with lies came to an end. His face and name were widely published, effectively ending his social standing. His parents, who once praised their son as the pride of their family, berated him during the visit, calling him the shame of the family and saying, "Your misdeeds have become such big news, we can't face anyone. We're sorry to Aaron. They even apologized to me. It's all our fault this happened. We're so sorry," they said, looking utterly exhausted. Ethan, disowned by his in-laws, sent me a letter asking for reconciliation, saying, "You're all I have left. I'll spend my life making it up to you. Please don't leave me alone. I only used her to get what I wanted, and the only person I truly love is you." I immediately tore up the letter and didn't respond. His words meant nothing. If he truly loved me, why wasn't he worried when I was hospitalized after being attacked by his mistress? Why was he laughing with her about how good it was that the nagging, ugly wife was gone? He also wrote, "Are you divorcing me because I'm not a lawyer but a janitor? How terrible. Do you choose men based on their status? What is he misunderstanding? It's not about him not being a lawyer or being a janitor. The problem is that he pretended to be a lawyer, deceived everyone, betrayed me, and committed crimes. Now, Ethan has been dismissed from his job and isn't even a janitor anymore. No woman would choose a man with a status as a criminal." And then came the trial. The attack was so severe that, had lawyer Owen not called an ambulance, it might have been fatal, which led to the charge being elevated from assault to attempted murder. The question of whether his mistress had the intent to kill was rigorously investigated, despite her desperate claims that there was no intent to kill, and she only meant to hospitalize me. Her words during the attack, "You should just disappear," indicated murderous intent, leading to a severe sentence, even for a first offense. Ethan, too, received a heavy sentence due to the egregiousness of his actions. It's almost comforting to think of them both in prison, though they're in separate facilities for men and women. Even if they were together, they would likely blame each other and split up soon. After serving their sentences, they'll be saddled with debt from the damages and compensation they must pay, especially since Ethan's fraud convictions might prevent them from borrowing money from banks. Their lives will be tough. This incident caused quite a stir on social media. A self-proclaimed lawyer, who was actually a fraudster involved in an attempted murder case against his wife, had been active in political and gender debates, leading to a massive backlash when the truth came out. Ethan's name trended daily. Reflecting on everything, some people have come out saying they always thought the lawyer was too ignorant, and that they suspected him from the start. Especially those who had conflicting ideologies with Ethan, or those he had attacked. were quick to say "I told you so" and criticized his entire philosophy. Those who disliked this reaction attacked Ethan's critics, accusing them of getting carried away. Somehow, the case also evolved into a debate about gender. It turned into discussions of this is why men or women are their own worst enemies. Criticism led to more criticism, escalating into political and gender debates, making the situation increasingly heated. However, as the saying goes, a person's gossip lasts but 9 days. And soon, the uproar about Ethan began to subside. I, too, became a focal point throughout this event. And the attention wasn't always sympathetic. Fortunately, my family and coworkers were supportive. But there were those who harshly questioned. Didn't you realize your husband wasn't really a lawyer? Were you only looking at his status? How did you not notice he was committing fraud? Were you complicit or just incompetent? Some even accused me of being an accomplice, claiming I must have known and stayed silent. Anonymous people on internet news also freely posted their speculations. I wanted to shout, "You know nothing." Why should I, the victim, be subjected to such comments? Yet, the saying that a person's gossip lasts but 9 days holds true here too. And soon the strange looks and wild accusations around me died down. "You've been through a lot," said Lawyer Owen, who not only provided legal assistance but also supported me personally, always offering kind words. "Yes, but thanks to you, I received compensation and managed to overcome the trauma." "Thank you so much," I replied. "I'm glad." I was worried about how things would turn out. I really apologize for the trouble my husband caused. I'm also sorry for all the trouble I caused. Don't worry about it. You were the main victim, after all. Don't mind it. Thanks to you, we managed to deal with a criminal pretending to be a lawyer in our firm. If we hadn't noticed, he might have caused significant damage eventually. I'm glad it didn't come to that. If it's okay with you, could we perhaps keep in touch, not just as lawyer and client? His face was red, and I felt my cheeks warm up too. Yes, I'd like that, Matt. If you would. And so, I began dating Lawyer Owen. Matt. Even after the professional relationship as lawyer and client ended, he remained incredibly kind. I expected some criticism from society, but it seemed the public had lost interest in the incident, and no one said much about it. However, my friends teased me about how much I must love lawyers. It wasn't about his profession, though. Sure, I fell for him through his work helping me. But more than anything, it was his character that I fell for. Still, I'm indeed relieved that Matt is a real lawyer. After all, I've had enough of fake ones. If you don't want to work, then get out of this house. Even though I finally got a job offer, having a freeloader like you around is demotivating and a nuisance. My sister Nicole, raising her voice in anger, blames me because she didn't like the dinner I made. So, that's why Cutting off my words, Nicole seeks help from our mother. "Mom, say something. How long do you plan to keep this parasite in our house? This house is ours, right? Is it okay if our life gets harder because of someone like her?" Well, now that Nicole has got a job, maybe it's time for the parasite to leave? It would be pitiful if she bothers Nicole. "Ashley, you're old enough, so just leave the house." Hearing Nicole's words, our mother immediately takes her side. Empowered by having our mother on her side, Nicole goes even further. "See, even Mom agrees, just get out." Don't ever come back. You're not part of the family anyway. Despite all the sacrifices I've made for the family. Realizing that they never cared makes me incredibly sad. Feeling that staying here is just foolish, I quietly make up my mind. Alright, I'll leave. And I'll never involve myself with you, Mom, or Nicole again. That's fine with you both, right? Hearing my decision, Nicole and our mother point at me and laughingly say, "Of course, that's perfect. With one less parasite, we'll save on living expenses. Now pack your things and leave." That's right. I have Nicole, I don't need a parasite like you. Well, I'll leave tomorrow, but can I take all my belongings? Obviously. Make sure you take everything and never come back. Having a freeloader like you related to me is a stain on my life. Take all your belongings and get out. Understood. Then I'll take everything that's mine. As if you have anything of value, pretending to be strong. While Nicole and our mother mock me, they reach for the food I made again. I leave them to it and return to my room. My name is Ashley, and I am 29 and single this year. I live at home with my mother, her new husband Jason, and my sister Nicole. Before she remarried, our mother was kind to me too, but after Nicole was born, she doted on her and didn't care much for me. Ashley, you're the older sister, so give in to Nicole. But this is something I bought with my own allowance. Nicole wants it. Don't be so selfish. Our mother takes the clothes I bought and gives them to Nicole. Yay! I really wanted this dress. Nicole receives it from our mother with a smile as if it's the most natural thing in the world. Ashley, buy yourself some new clothes with this. Feeling down after having my clothes taken, Jason discreetly hands me some money so the others won't notice. Is that okay? I'm sorry, I can't protect you more. Thank you, Dad. Jason is kind and tries to treat Nicole and me equally. But he can't often defend me openly in front of my strong-willed mother. However, having him there made me feel supported, the only solace I had. Thanks to him, I was able to go to college and graduate successfully. I'm going to live near the company once I start working. It takes too much time to commute from home. What are you saying? After we paid for your college, you're going to leave without repaying that favor? I won't allow you to live alone until you've repaid your debt to us. But if it takes 2 hours to commute to the company, I need to live closer. Wow, I'm appalled. You just want to make life easier for yourself by living away from your family. Anyway, I absolutely won't allow you to live alone. I had planned to leave home once I got a job. But faced with our mother's fierce opposition, I was forced to continue living miserably at home. Then, 6 years later. What? Dad has? Why so suddenly? He suddenly collapsed at work and didn't make it to the hospital in time. When Nicole started university, Jason suddenly passed away due to a sudden illness. What? I just started university. What are we going to do about tuition and other expenses? Our mother and Nicole only worry about their own future, leaving all the funeral preparations to me. Since you're not blood related to Dad, you shouldn't feel sad, right? You've been doing nothing but mooching off us at home, so at least be useful now. You're right, Mom. She's just a freeloader who lazes around at home even though she graduated from university. Dad just wasted his money on her tuition. Even during the wake, when it's just family, they continue to hurl abuse at me. Wanting to honor Jason's memory, I simply endure their insults. A few days later, after the funeral, we sort through the inheritance. Our mother and Nicole find a bank book in Jason's name and are delighted. Dad left us so much money, lucky me. Now I can buy the designer bag I wanted. That's great. Now we don't have to worry about Nicole's tuition or living expenses for a while. Maybe I'll buy some dresses too. Ah, of course, you don't get a share, Nicole. All the money Dad left is mine because I'm his real blood. You're not his real child, so you have no right to it. I never counted on inheriting anything from my stepfather. But Nicole still lashes out at me. I never intended to take anything in the first place. But since Dad left it, I just want it to be treated with care. Shut up. I don't want someone like you, who doesn't work and lives at home like a parasite, to worry about me. But I am working, you know. I've explained this many times. What? You say you're working while you're home all day? You're just delusional because you're an unmarried woman who can't make money and can't leave home, right? I definitely don't want to end up like you. No matter how often I explain my situation to Nicole, she never listens. However, I hope that once she starts job hunting, she might understand what my work entails. Thinking this, I, as an older sister, choose to overlook Nicole's harsh words. 2 years after our father's death, Nicole, now a junior in college, had finally started her job hunt. But perhaps because it's a tough process, she seemed more irritable than before. One evening, as we were all eating dinner, Nicole sighed heavily and said, "Ugh, I'm working so hard on job hunting and it's so exhausting too. Come home to see a freeloader lounging around the house. Isn't it unbearable? A freeloader? Who are you talking about? You, obviously. You don't even go outside, just lazing around the house. It's so annoying." I retorted to Nicole's accusation. Enough already. How many times do I have to tell you? I was working today, too. What? When I came back, you were leisurely reading a book on the couch. You call that work? That was a book related to my work. I've explained what I do to you many times. A job where you just stay home all day, fiddling on the computer or reading books, that's not a real job. Nowadays, even fresh graduates have to go to the office. Maybe the career you're aiming for requires going into the office. But there are jobs that can be done from home if you look. You're really annoying. I'm tired from job hunting. I don't want to hear a freeloader's ramblings. Nicole slammed the living room door and retreated to her room. Though I understood that job hunting was stressful, her increasing attacks on me were wearing me down. I sighed softly and looked over at our mother, who continued eating quietly. Mom. Nicole won't listen to me at all. Can you please explain to her about my work? Maybe later. She's just stressed from job hunting. That doesn't mean she can act like this every day. I'm getting stressed too. Don't say that. Ashley, you're the older sister, so try to be more considerate of Nicole. Even when I asked our mother to persuade Nicole, she only pressured me to endure. Doubting the attitudes of our mother and Nicole, I continued to do what I could for my family. Then, one day, as I was bringing dinner to the table, Nicole screamed shrilly. "What is this meal? You're home all day and still make shortcuts in cooking. This week has been busy with work. It's okay to cut corners when I'm busy. If you have a complaint, why don't you cook for yourself? Ha, work? Your job, which can't even earn money, must be about managing the household perfectly, right? All you do every day is play on the computer or read books. That's why. I'm telling you, I am working. Just listen to what I'm saying for once. Despite my desperate responses, my words never reached Nicole. Glancing sideways at our mother, she just turned away, pretending not to notice. If you don't want to work, then get out of this house. Even though I finally got a job offer. Having a freeloader like you around is demotivating and a nuisance. So, that's why I. Cutting off my words, Nicole seeks help from our mother. Mom, say something. How long do you plan to keep this parasite in our house? This house is ours, right? Is it okay if our life gets harder because of someone like her? Well, now that Nicole has got a job, maybe it's time for the parasite to leave? It would be pitiful if she bothers Nicole. Ashley, you're old enough, so just leave the house. Hearing Nicole's words, our mother immediately takes her side. Empowered by having our mother on her side, Nicole goes even further. See, even Mom agrees, just get out. Don't ever come back. You're not part of the family anyway. Despite all the sacrifices I've made for the family. Realizing that they never cared makes me incredibly sad. Feeling that staying here is just foolish, I quietly make up my mind. All right, I'll leave. And I'll never involve myself with you, Mom, or Nicole again. That's fine with you both, right? Hearing my decision, Nicole and our mother point at me and laughingly say, of course, that's perfect. With one less parasite, we'll save on living expenses. Now pack your things and leave. That's right. I have Nicole, I don't need a parasite like you. Well, I'll leave tomorrow, but can I take all my belongings? Obviously. Make sure you take everything and never come back. Having a freeloader like you related to me is a stain on my life. Take all your belongings and get out. Understood. Then I'll take everything that's mine. As if you have anything of value, pretending to be strong. Nicole and our mother mock me as they reach for the food I made again. I leave them to it and return to my room. Later, I hurriedly searched for a new place to live. And managed to find an apartment available for immediate move-in. As I was moving in, my phone rang. Picking up, I heard a loud voice on the other end. Why did you take all the furniture and appliances? The house is empty because you took everything. Bring back everything you took right now. What are you talking about? Nicole, you were the one who said I should take all my belongings. So, I only took the things I bought with my own money. I didn't steal anything that belonged to you or Mom. What? What are you talking about, Nicole? Didn't Mom buy the furniture and appliances with Dad's inheritance? After the first anniversary of Dad's death, she replaced everything that was old. No, that's not true. I bought those furniture and appliances with my own money. Most of Dad's inheritance was used to pay off Mom's debts. I continued to explain calmly to Nicole. What? There's nothing left. Then, what about our living expenses until now? Nicole, unable to grasp the situation, muttered in a faint voice. If you're curious, why don't you ask Mom? As I suggested this, Nicole hastily turned to our mother nearby. What does this mean, Mom? That's, well. Hearing our mother's flustered voice, I sighed and spoke the truth. I was paying for everything, Nicole. The living expenses and your tuition fees, all of it. I've explained many times that I earn a decent salary working from home as a software engineer. No way. You're lying. You were just playing on the computer every day. How can you make money from that? You must have been using Dad's inheritance, right? And you squandered it? Nicole refused to believe my story and even started accusing me falsely. I pressed on with the reality. I earned over $5,000 a month as a freelance software engineer. By studying hard on my own. More than half of that I put into our household expenses. But still, it's unbelievable that it would run out so quickly. The inheritance wasn't enough, and I covered the rest. And Mom continued to splurge, so there's no money left now. What? Then what about my tuition fees? If we can't pay, I won't be able to graduate from university. Didn't you have money left too? Why don't you use that? There's nothing left. It all went quickly because I bought department store cosmetics and brand items. That's why I told you to use it wisely. Nicole. What will happen if you can't graduate? We were counting on your salary. Mom, that's your problem. What will happen to me if I can't graduate? What? I don't know anything about that. As they blamed each other, I could hear Nicole and our mother shouting through the phone. Both seemed to finally understand their predicament, their voices tinged with panic. Well, if you can't pay the tuition, you'll have to drop out of university. And the job offer you received based on your expected graduation might even be revoked. That's terrible. Please, big sister, come back home. We're family, aren't we? If not, at least pay my tuition fees. Yes, if Ashley comes back, everything will be fine. Please, Ashley, you're our only hope. Let's live together as a family of 3, like before. After you drove me out and repeatedly called me a parasite. It's ridiculous to say we're family now. It's too late for that. With Nicole and our mother begging tearfully. I firmly ended the call and blocked their numbers. Later, Nicole and our mother, having lost the financial support I provided, failed to pay the rent for the house and were evicted. Unable to pay her tuition, Nicole was inevitably dismissed from the university. And her job offer was revoked as a result. Forced to drop out, Nicole managed to scrape by with multiple part-time jobs. Our mother, having rarely worked before, started as a cashier at a supermarket. But struggled with the unfamiliar work, leading to frequent arguments with Nicole over stress. As for me, I was finally living alone, enjoying the freedom and financial savings from not having to support the household. I decided to pursue my interests and walk my own path toward happiness. Who said you could sleep? It's just that I have a fever over 100 degrees right now. That has nothing to do with me. Just manage your own health. My husband taunts me as I lay in bed with a high fever. When I try to ignore him. Got some nerve ignoring me, huh? Stop it, please. He forcefully tries to drag me out of bed, grabbing my hand. I desperately shake him off, and he stumbles backward. That's when his switch flipped. Don't you dare defy your husband. That was when he hurled the empty wine bottle he was holding, aiming it straight at me. I instinctively covered my face. For a moment, I braced for death. Fortunately, his aim was off, and the bottle shattered against the window instead. Don't dodge. What are you doing? If that had hit me. It's because you don't obey me, and you don't even do the housework. I never said you could slack off. Then, a voice came from behind my husband. I can't just stand by and listen to that. My husband turned around immediately. Why are you here? He couldn't hide his shock at the person in front of him. I never imagined you'd go this far. There's a reason for this. How disgraceful. Reprimanded harshly, my husband quieted down and began to tremble with overwhelming fear. Perhaps he instinctively understood the fate that awaited him. But this wasn't the end. I was determined to settle scores for all I had endured up to now. I am Judy, 54 years old. I live in a house with my same-aged husband, Kevin. We met at a dinner party. I didn't know at the time, but our fathers were acquainted. I only found this out decades later. Nice to meet you. I'm Kevin Anderson. Oh, nice to meet you too. Honestly, I was reluctant about the dinner party. I thought living alone would be easier and better. So, I acted as standoffish as possible to make him dislike me. However, Kevin kept pushing his way into my life. What are your hobbies? Hobbies? I'm often at home, so I read books and do crafts. Those hobbies suit you, Judy. Is that so? Before I knew it, I was caught up in Kevin's pace. Eventually, I found myself dating him. I thought it was troublesome at first, but he kept a comfortable distance, making it not so bad to be around him. I think it's about time. About time? Yeah. How about we get married? Huh? Oh yeah. We met when we were both 25, and by the time we were 30. He had somewhat persuaded me into marriage. I thought it would be harder than it actually was. At 32, we had a daughter, and I thought this was how life would continue. I'm going to the hospital. Are you feeling unwell? A bit. But I think it'll be okay. After turning 50, I began to feel increasingly unwell without knowing why. So, I went to the hospital, where I received an unexpected diagnosis. Is that really true? Yes. It might be due to age, but it's likely changes in your female hormones. Is there a cure? Some people see symptoms subside within a year, while others may continue for up to 3 years. I see. Let's start with improving your lifestyle habits to minimize the symptoms as much as possible. I had heard about menopause from friends, but now it was my turn to experience it. When I got home, Kevin was waiting for me. So? What did they say? It's menopause. Menopause. So, are you okay? Huh? I couldn't help but raise my voice. A little rest should do the trick, right? Maybe, but... And thus, I would be tormented by Kevin's frivolity. As he suggested, I took some time off work. If it had eased my symptoms, I would have been content. But it wasn't that simple. Hey, are you okay? I have a headache. I'm sorry, but you'll need to manage dinner on your own today. What? Why? Why? Because I can barely move. You know I can't cook. Then maybe order takeout or something. Just get it ready. In the end, I had to prepare dinner for Kevin. All the while, he enjoyed his drinks while watching TV, as I battled a severe headache. When we first got married, we were supposed to support each other through life. After that, his attitude towards me never changed. I have something I want to discuss. A discussion? Hope it's not something bothersome. Bothersome? So? What is it? I'm thinking of taking a leave of absence from work. A leave? Don't you just lack motivation? That's not it at all. I'm really suffering here. Then, after some thought, Kevin reluctantly agreed. Well, you'll take care of the house in return. I'll try my best. Not try, you'll do it. His tone was so harsh it made me think he might be the one going through menopause. I wondered why he couldn't understand me. But thinking about it just made me more tired. Half a year has passed since I took my leave. Judy? Are you okay? Yeah, somewhat. you don't look okay at all. I was out shopping with a friend when I suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed right there. My symptoms didn't improve, and my worried friend called an ambulance. At the hospital, I received an 4 and my condition finally stabilized. Your husband is coming soon. So, don't worry. Is that so? Thank you. Despite my friend's reassuring words, I felt nothing but anxiety. I had been criticized so much that I expected nothing good now. That I had ended up in the hospital. About an hour later, Kevin arrived. Hey. Are you really okay? I was really worried. Yeah. I was surprised by his worried tone and struggled to respond properly. I had expected him to be angry, but he was surprisingly kind. I'm glad you're safe. I'm sorry for worrying you. Never mind. Just rest well today. For the first time in a long time, he spoke kindly, and I reveled in the happiness. I wondered when was the last time I felt this way. So, can you go home today? I'll rest a bit more and then go home. Okay. I'll be waiting at home then. Are you sure you're okay? I can make it home by myself. I was set to go home by evening. On the way, I had never wanted to see Kevin as much as I did then. I was eager to see what kind of face he would be waiting with. Hi, Kevin. However, the emotions I had felt vanished the moment I saw his face. You're late. Where have you been loitering? I came straight home. I doubt it. Well, it's time for dinner anyway. I was stunned. He hadn't been worried at all. Huh? Stop that, huh? Hurry up and get it ready, or I'll be in trouble. As I was told to, I started preparing the meal. I didn't have the energy to argue and just wanted to get through the evening. I'm going to rest now. Hey. There are still things to do, aren't there? I can't do any more today. Besides, if I collapse again and end up in the hospital, you wouldn't like that, would you? Well, that's true. But just for today. Without responding to Kevin, I went straight to bed and managed to sleep like a log. Mom is coming this weekend, so make sure you entertain her well. This weekend? That's in 2 days. What? Are you planning to tell her not to come now? It's not that, I just wish you had told me earlier. It'll be fine. Just make sure there are no slip-ups. I was a bit nervous about meeting my mother-in-law after so long. I wanted to entertain her well, as Kevin said. But wishing he was more reasonable was perhaps asking for too much. Then, the day before my mother-in-law was due to arrive. Hey. Mom's coming tomorrow, and look how dirty this is. He pointed at the table, which was a mess from his drinking earlier. I'll clean it up now. Arguing with Kevin would do no good, so I focused silently on the task. However, he seemed displeased with that too, constantly nagging from the sidelines. I really couldn't understand what he wanted. It wasn't until 1 a.m. that Kevin was finally satisfied enough to go to sleep. She's supposed to arrive around noon today, so please take care of it. However, when I woke up, my body felt as heavy as lead. Just to be sure, I took my temperature and it was over 100 degrees. Instead of showing concern, Kevin made a grimace. What are you doing at a time like this? I'll handle it somehow. Really, you're so useless. Kevin was unusually irritable. His mother held that much significance for him. I had been lying down until just before my mother-in-law's arrival. But there was no sign of recovery. It's been a while, Judy. Thank you for coming all the way. Please, come in. I managed to greet my mother-in-law, but I don't remember much after that. I was chatting with her in the living room. But my condition was only getting worse, and I was nearing my limit. Are you okay? Yes. What is it? Kevin. Isn't Judy feeling unwell? Huh? That's just because she stayed up late last night. Let her rest a bit. All right. Kevin carried me to the bedroom. Just stay quiet and lie down. I had no energy left to respond. Realizing that there would be a problem, I made a phone call to someone. I don't know how much time had passed when I was awakened by Kevin's voice. Who said you could sleep? I have a fever over 100 degrees right now. Plus, you were the one who told me to lie down just before. That doesn't mean you can just sleep. Besides, a fever has nothing to do with me. Just manage your own health. He spoke to me as if mocking me for being bedridden with a high fever. When I tried to ignore him. Got some nerve ignoring me, huh? Stop it, please. He forcefully tried to drag me out of bed, grabbing my hand. I desperately shook him off, and he stumbled backward. That's when his switch flipped. Don't you defy your husband. Kevin left the room and then reappeared with a wine bottle. For a moment, I braced for death. Fortunately, his control was poor and the bottle hit the window, shattering into pieces. Don't dodge. What are you doing? What if it had hit me? It's because you don't obey me. I never said you could slack off on the housework. Then, a voice came from behind Kevin. I can't just stand by and listen to that. Kevin immediately turned around. Why are you here? He couldn't hide his shock at the person in front of him. I never imagined you'd go this far. There's a reason for this. How disgraceful. Reprimanded harshly, Kevin quieted down and began to tremble with overwhelming fear. Perhaps he instinctively understood the fate that awaited him. But this wasn't the end. I was determined to settle scores for all I had endured up to now. Why are you here? Kevin asked my father. Why? Because Judy contacted me. She said she had reached her limit. I couldn't stand Kevin's rampage anymore and had called my father for help. He was so furious that he looked like he might hit someone. Wait, please. There's a proper reason for this. A reason, huh? Then let me hear this reason of yours. Well. Kevin fumbled, unable to continue. He had spoken impulsively and hadn't thought about what would come next. What's wrong? Wasn't there a reason? Please wait. There's no reason, is there? Lying now won't do you any good. Yes. Reprimanded by my father, Kevin looked like a frog being stared down by a snake. I hadn't expected things to go so smoothly. There are things a husband can and cannot do. Then, Kevin looked at me and began to say something even more outrageous. It's all Judy's fault, really. I don't know if it's menopause or what. But lately she's just been sleeping and not doing any housework. I couldn't take it anymore and retorted. Don't joke around. Do you have any idea how hard I work every day preparing your meals and doing the housework? You take it for granted, but it's not. Shut up. You just need to obey me. Who do you think allows you to live like this? So that's your true feeling. What? Do you think we're alone here? Kevin, startled, looked ahead. There stood my father, arms crossed. I didn't expect it to be this bad. Looking back, I shouldn't have agreed to the dinner party just because we knew each other. What? Actually, I knew your father a bit. But my father never said a word. That's right. Because your father had borrowed money from me. My father did such a thing? Then, my father chuckled. I immediately understood what he was thinking. Since we're on the subject, I'll have you, his son, repay it. What? But my father is already dead. Even if a parent dies, their debts are inherited by their children. But you can't prove that. Don't worry about that. I've kept the promissory note well preserved. That's unbelievable. Kevin's shoulders slumped in defeat. Unfortunately for him, his troubles were not over yet. Hearing the commotion, his mother came to see what was happening. What's all this noise? His mother was unaware that my father was there. She also didn't know about the terrible things her son had been doing up to this point. Hi, it's been a while. Why are you here? Actually, my daughter asked for my help, so I came here. Help? What for? Kevin, perhaps to avoid drawing attention to himself, shrank smaller and held his breath. Seeing him like that made me burst out laughing, which I did not miss. Why are you making yourself so small? Don't say unnecessary things. Unnecessary? This situation is your fault, you know. Unaware of the situation, my mother-in-law listened as my father explained the details. Kevin, what have you done to Judy? It's not like that, Mom. No excuses. And you might not know this, but I also suffered from menopausal symptoms, so I understand how tough it can be. You too? But your father never did anything terrible like you are now. At this moment, Kevin had no allies. I had not known that my mother-in-law suffered from menopausal symptoms like me. I knew she had become a housewife after turning 50. But since we weren't close after the marriage, she might not have wanted to burden us with her life. He was always proactive in helping out with the household chores, unlike you. Eventually, Kevin seemed resigned and apologized to me. I was wrong. From now on, I'll support you, Judy. Can we start over? It seemed that Kevin was serious. Just when I was about to forgive him, thinking he really meant it. Just wait a minute. What? Are you really okay with this? Prompted by my father's words, I paused to think. Then, as if to warn me, my mother-in-law chimed in. The final decision is yours, Judy, but think it through carefully. I pondered repeatedly whether to forgive Kevin. Just then, I caught him yawning out of the corner of my eye. At that moment, my mind was made up. I've made my decision. Is that so? You're going to give me another try, right? I took a deep breath before declaring to Kevin. I'm getting a divorce. So this is the end for us. I had completely forgotten that I was running a high fever at the time. What are you saying? You can't live on your own, can you? Kevin approached me, his presence imposing fear. Stop it. His mother's command halted him. Don't show any more disgraceful behavior, please. Fine. I understand. I don't need a useless woman like you anyway. With that, Kevin stormed out of the house. Judy, we really caused you trouble. If I had been more attentive. That's not true. I was saved by your words just now. What will you do now? Like I said before, I'll prepare for the divorce. Then I'll prepare on this side too. With a determined look, my father left. My mother-in-law and I remained and talked for a bit. I hope this makes things a bit easier for you, Judy. If things get tough, may I consult with you, Mother? Are you serious? Yes. I would like to hear more from you as someone experienced in life. Understood. If this old woman is okay with you, I'd be happy to help. Several weeks later, we divorced without any issues regarding property division. Shortly after, I moved back to my parents' house to recuperate. About half a year later, I received a call from my ex-husband, who I had not been in contact with. He was living alone, regularly visiting the hospital. What do you want after all this time? I actually have a chronic condition that's getting worse. They said it could turn serious if it continues like this. I figured as much. He must be unable to handle it on his own and is seeking help. So, what do you want me to do? I want you to take care of me from now on. The doctor said it would be tough to manage alone. Is there any benefit for me in doing that? It would just be for a while, just until I recover. His selfishness seemed unchanged. Did he really think his ex-wife would agree to such a request? If he did, that was truly wishful thinking. Why don't you ask your mother then? I already did, but she refused. That figures. If I were in his mother's place, I wouldn't want to care for him either. That's unfortunate. That's why I'm asking you, Judy. As much as I'd like to help, it's impossible. Maybe if you had asked earlier. Besides, I'm not free either, so I'm going to hang up now. My ex-husband then pleaded more desperately. I apologize for everything. It was all my fault. That doesn't show any real sincerity. I was enjoying this exchange. I never intended to lend a hand. But I wanted to let him grasp for hope and then face despair. I won't ever do it again. Please. That's impossible. He kept apologizing over and over, but I was starting to get bored. I'm sorry, but I can't take care of you. I'm still dealing with menopause myself. How am I supposed to care for you in this condition? Desperate, Kevin didn't seem to care about appearances anymore. Please. You're all I have right now. It's all too late. Regretting and apologizing now doesn't turn back time. I've learned my lesson and understand now. So, he didn't give up and kept pressing. He might sound remorseful, but forgiving him now would undo all the progress I'd made. I've come this far on my own, so you should just do what you like now. It will be easier for you that way. What am I supposed to do then? You might have forgotten, but I divorced you, remember? We can't live together anyway. Are you serious? Don't make me repeat myself. Talking to you just adds to my stress. Goodbye. With that, I hung up the phone. His needing care was none of my concern. I muttered, serves you right. After that, being free from the stress of my ex-husband, my health began to improve. I was looking forward to returning to work soon. One morning, something else came up. Do you remember what I told Kevin before? About how his father had debts? Yes, that's right. It took some time, but it looks like I can finally make a claim. A bit anxious, I asked my father a question. Out of curiosity, how much is it? $30,000. What? That much? Well, a lot happened back then. Though I have the promissory note, I never really planned on having it repaid. But this time, I couldn't overlook it. My father's expression seemed a bit sad. I didn't know much about the relationship between my father-in-law and him. But it must have been a good one. However, Kevin had ruined even that. There was no way he could prepare such a large sum now, but I felt no sympathy. It was merely a punishment. Judy, can I talk to you for a moment? What happened? I had become more frequent in contacting my mother-in-law. It's about Kevin. I heard through the grapevine that he's filed for bankruptcy. He filed for bankruptcy? Yes. Apparently, he couldn't manage living on his own. I hope he learns his lesson from this. I wonder. He's been like this for years. Well, it's none of our business anymore. You're right about that. Talking with my mother-in-law was genuinely enjoyable. Yet, I'm also getting on in years. How much time I have left, I don't know. Yet, I plan to cherish each day and live it to the fullest. Please consider how your husband feels, unable to sleep due to our baby's nightly crying. You can't manage the housework or childcare, you're an incomplete wife. Isn't it shameful for a housewife? If you want to start over, cool your head and then come back. Despite the late hour, my husband heartlessly locked me and our 4-month-old daughter out of the house. Even when she cries, he doesn't hold her. Instead, he hurries to another room, always making sure to click his tongue audibly. Even when I feed her formula or change her diapers, I panic if she doesn't stop crying. I worry more about my husband's mood than about our daughter's condition. The postpartum fatigue was more enduring than I expected. And my husband was utterly indifferent. The man I once loved had changed, and gradually, I felt nothing towards him. My name is Kelly, and I'm a 28-year-old housewife. After graduating from a technical college, I worked at a web company but resigned when I got married. My partner was Ben, a salesperson I met at the company where I worked reception. He initiated conversations with me often, skillful with his words, which quickly drew me in, as I was shy and inexperienced in love. He complimented how gracefully I moved, saying, "You were so beautiful I couldn't take my eyes off you," which led me to boldly pursue him, and we started dating. I was so blindly in love that I followed almost everything he said. When he expressed a desire for me to focus on household duties after marriage, I prioritized his wishes over my job, which I had enjoyed. During our dating, he'd say, "I'll earn the money, so I want my wife to focus on the house. And I want children in 3 years. They should learn this and that." I found his strong opinions about our married life charming, and felt happy to be by his dependable side. Indeed, as a trader, my husband had a good income and was on a successful career path. However, he was extremely concerned about appearances and demanded perfection in my housework. He had many friends and would often invite colleagues over without notice, which made those times particularly challenging. Even though I was at home, I could never relax. And those who drank badly would make noise late into the night, preventing us from having a peaceful weekend. Yet, it was better than him coming home in the morning after a night out. And I was happy when he completely stopped this behavior after I became pregnant. He often spoke grandly, perhaps due to his job. But I tried to see it as part of his profession and cherished the joy of our growing family. However, after giving birth to our daughter, I began to experience hell. 4 months after our beloved daughter's birth, she often smiled and recently started rolling over. My husband remained busy as usual, leaving my daughter and me mostly alone from morning to night. I was well aware of this, but it seemed he had no interest in our daughter at all. Unless I brought her up, she was never a topic of conversation between us. Even when she slept in the crib right in front of him, he ignored her. And if she fussed even a little at night, he would click his tongue. There were days when I was so sleep-deprived that I didn't notice my daughter crying. On such days, my husband would walk irritably to the next room, without even trying to hold her. The following day, he would invariably scold me, saying, "Don't you have any parental awareness? The room's a mess, laundry's piling up, and what are you doing all day? On top of that, you won't let your tired husband sleep. What kind of harassment is this?" As he stomped around before leaving for work. Which one of us lacks parental awareness? I wanted to retort multiple times. But it was true that both my housekeeping and childcare had become subpar. My in-laws, who visited often, were also concerned. "I'm sorry, I haven't been able to clean properly." I apologized while serving coffee, but they both shook their heads. "Kelly, you're doing enough for our son. We'll make sure to talk to him. Plus, she's such a cute child." It's understandable if housekeeping slips a bit. He doesn't understand a mother's heart at all. My mother-in-law, in particular, was supportive and had repeatedly called my husband to advocate for me. However, this backfired, and my husband's visits to his parents' home, which had been monthly, drastically decreased. Amidst this, I received news that my sister, Megan, had quit her job and was returning to our hometown. "I haven't greeted your husband and child yet, so I'll drop by to say hello." Unlike me, Megan is bright and lively but also headstrong, and quick to speak her mind if she dislikes something. This resignation likely stemmed from a disagreement with a boss or colleague, as this was not her first job change for such reasons. I invited her over when my husband was off work, thinking I might need to intervene if they clashed, but surprisingly, they got along well right from the start. I was slightly disappointed but relieved and watched over their interaction. As the day turned to evening, Megan showed no signs of leaving. My husband naturally said, "Make sure you prepare a meal for Megan." And I was taken aback. I only had ingredients for 2. And I wished he had told me earlier if this was the plan. Unable to interrupt their lively conversation, I managed to prepare a meal for 3 using whatever was available. Megan scrutinized the table full of dishes, and I had a bad feeling, which turned out to be justified. Is this nutritionally balanced? The mix of various dishes looks off, and the portions seem bulked up. Isn't this bad for someone breastfeeding? It's pitiful for the child, Ben. Though she tried to look concerned, a sneer twisted her lips. That unchanged, mean-spirited face from our childhood was why I still preferred to avoid her. Do you agree with Megan too? I didn't say anything because you're my wife. But it's frustrating to think that the money I worked hard to earn is wasted like this. Just because you had a child, you act like you're in charge, hardly doing any laundry or cleaning. The baby cries so much at night, it's making me anxious about our future. Quick to join in, my husband began to blame me alongside my sister. Watching them, I felt something inside me breaking. This is serious. I have some time before I start working again. So how about I take care of the house instead of you, Kelly? That's a great idea. This way, Kelly can focus on what she loves most, taking care of the child. By the time I realized it, they were both looking at me together. Noticing my confusion, Megan dramatically sighed. "Kelly, you've always been like this. You're not single anymore, you know? Ben will suffer if things continue this way. I'm saying I'll come and do the housework for you. We can't ask for that, it's a family matter." I didn't expect Megan to stay so late today, so I just made do with what we had. Normally, it's fine. Having my difficult sister come into our home could lead to anything. She was my sister by blood, but I couldn't stand the thought of her invading my space. It's your fault things have gotten to this point. Don't make excuses. Use this as a chance to rethink how you should be as a wife. My husband seemed pleased to have an ally, and his taunts grew harsher. Megan's frequent visits to our house were almost forcefully decided, and I felt suffocated. The next day, Megan showed up at my house early in the morning, carrying several bags. "What's with all the bags?" I asked, and she replied with a sneer. Just in case I end up staying overnight. I'm not like you, who only prepared food for two knowing I was coming. Where's Ben? I asked when she said he was at work. Megan plopped down on the sofa, looking bored, and started fiddling with her phone. Aren't you going to do anything? I asked. What's with that tone? It's unbelievable, considering I came here to help. Besides, housework is just about cleaning what's visible. It doesn't take much time, right? Aren't you annoyed, being bossed around by your husband all the time? Her response made me realize we truly couldn't understand each other. As the saying goes, invisible housework is endless. And housewives don't have the luxury of time to argue back. However, after 3 days of Megan being around, I grew accustomed to the situation and felt less irritated. In fact, my husband was so enamored with Megan that he was always in a good mood, which made it easier for me as he stopped worrying about our daughter's night cries. But I was uncomfortable with how close my husband and sister seemed, despite being in-laws. I hesitated to speak out, fearing they would gang up on me if I did. Since we stopped visiting my in-laws, they hardly contacted us, making it difficult to seek their advice casually. As I lived with this unresolved tension, a serious incident occurred. Megan slipped while holding my daughter, nearly dropping her. Shocked, my daughter started crying loudly, and I impulsively grabbed her from Megan's arms. Why are you handling her without permission? I won't forgive you if something happens to her. Megan, who had never seen me yell before, flinched for a moment but quickly twisted her face and snapped. She squirmed, and I lost balance. She didn't fall, so there's no need to make such a big deal. She's not cute at all, just like you. Maybe if she experiences a little pain from falling, she'll learn not to cry at night. She hurled unbelievable words at my 4-month-old, and then headed to my husband's room. Shortly after, I heard my husband's footsteps approaching, and I braced myself. What are you thinking? You two need to leave. As expected, my husband yelled at me. Despite holding my still crying daughter, he continued to berate me without care. After all the help from your sister, aren't you ashamed? You failed to manage the housework yourself. Yet you blow up over someone else's minor mistake. I never thought you were such a despicable woman. I don't want to see your face for a while, so please leave. If you really want to stay, then cool off before coming back. He pushed me towards the entrance before I could respond, and I found myself outside with my daughter. Hastily grabbing my bag, I got into the car, rocked by the motion of the vehicle. My daughter soon started breathing peacefully in her child seat. I considered finding a hotel but realized I needed to return home for my daughter's diapers and clothes. By the time I had driven over the mountain to the next town and back, it was too late to find an open store. When I returned and tried to unlock our home, I noticed the door was chained from the inside. Hearing the noise, my husband called out from within. What, you're back already? I'm sick of being kept awake by the crying at night, so just let me sleep soundly tonight. I'm fed up with you letting her cry incessantly like it's some kind of harassment. Both of you don't need to come back until morning. It's one thing to say that to me, but to point at our daughter and say don't come back is heartless. If I have to endure such arrogance from this man, I'd rather live a hard life just with my daughter. I didn't respond to my husband's words and got back into the car. As I drove out of our driveway, I regretted not grabbing at least my daughter's belongings. But the thought of running into my sister inside the house was too unpleasant. After checking that my daughter was still asleep, I headed to a place I used to visit often. About 30 minutes of driving through the nearly deserted streets at night. I arrived at the spot, relieved to see the lights on. I knocked on the door, and my mother-in-law emerged, eyes wide, exclaiming, "What are you doing here at this hour?" My father-in-law appeared behind her, also surprised, but they quickly invited me inside. Sensing the urgency from the way I arrived, despite the late hour, they brought out formula and diapers for my daughter. They had kept these supplies just in case we ever needed to stay. A kind gesture from when we used to visit more frequently. Feeling guilty that they had kept these items even though we hadn't visited in a while, I nearly cried. My mother-in-law, seeing my face, offered me a warm cup of tea. My father-in-law lovingly held my daughter, who he hadn't seen in a long time. Reluctant to burden my kind in-laws with my troubles, I finally opened up for my daughter's sake. I told them everything, how my husband showed no interest in our daughter, how he'd run to another room at night because her crying disturbed his sleep, and how he and my sister ridiculed my ability to manage the house and childcare since our daughter was born. Their expressions grew stern when I told them that today he had kicked out both me and my daughter. My father-in-law angrily said to my mother-in-law, "Call him. I can't believe he'd kick his wife and child out at such a late hour." My mother-in-law tried to call my husband, but he didn't answer. He usually set his phone to a loud volume because of his job and sales, and he had always answered calls during our fights. So him not picking up suggested he might have turned his phone off. Wondering how else to reach him, I remembered the baby monitor I had bought. I had linked the monitor with my smartphone to keep an eye on things while I was busy around the house. Since it was placed in the living room where the crib was, I could remotely check what was happening there. I did want to know what my husband was up to. What I saw through the live feed, however, was my husband and sister in a compromising position. A silent scream escaped me. A part of me had suspected something like this. Their overly familiar behavior, conspiring against me, it all made sense now. I knew my husband preferred women like my sister. Despite feeling numb, my heart ached. Determined not to let this pain be in vain, I started recording the video. "Mother, father, would you please watch this with me?" When they saw the footage, my mother-in-law leaned on my father-in-law for support, and he turned pale, staring at the screen. It was harsh for them, but I needed witnesses to what I had seen. My father-in-law continued to call my husband, to no avail. During this time, I contacted my own parents to briefly explain the situation. They immediately set out to come to us, and we decided to meet urgently at my now tainted home. Just an hour later, my daughter and I, along with both sets of parents, stood in front of my house. Given the circumstances, we skipped pleasantries, and I led the way by ringing the doorbell. Predictably, my husband and sister ignored it, thinking I had returned. I tried to calm my nerves and kept pressing the bell until, finally, my husband lazily opened the door. That's when our parents stormed in, followed by me and my daughter. My husband panicked at the sight of the incoming relatives. Pitifully, he was only in a t-shirt and boxers. "Hey, what is all this about?" Before I could reply, a woman's scream echoed. From the living room, it was undoubtedly my sister. Inside, she was seated on the floor in her underwear, holding her cheek, possibly struck by one of our parents. My father-in-law forcefully pulled my husband down to sit beside her, and a session of reprimanding began. My parents criticized my sister, and my in-laws scolded my husband. Accusations flew about the inappropriateness of trying to replace a sister, the irresponsibility of throwing out a wife and daughter late at night, and the shamelessness of their actions. Instead of apologizing or showing remorse, their responses were defensive. Why did you have to bring her parents all this way? She must have set up that camera to spy on her husband, right? You're all blaming us, but if Kelly hadn't spied, none of this would have happened. That's a crime too, so she should apologize for spying first. I had no idea there was a camera in the room. You never trusted me, did you? Despite living comfortably off my salary as a housewife, how could you do such a thing? You're the one who destroyed our marriage. You put the crack in it. They teamed up against me once again, confirming how little they respected me. I wondered what my parents really thought of me. Humiliated by my own sister stealing my husband. As I felt tears welling up, I forced myself to meet their eyes with strength. I bought that camera for our daughter, and I'm sorry to have used it this way. But now I see, you two are truly despicable. For the first time, my husband seemed to realize something as he remembered that camera. Our first purchase for our daughter after learning she was on the way. He fell silent. But my sister continued to retaliate. So what? It's still spying. Trying to gain sympathy with that won't work. We're not children, we need to look at the facts. Kelly, you've always been like this. Resorting to underhanded tactics, despite your nasty personality. It's no wonder I'm upset when you've snagged such a good husband. While I'm also of marriageable age. I thought I'd replace you. And find happiness since you can't handle household duties or childcare. The housework and childcare excuse is just an afterthought. Isn't it really all about Ben's money? When I said this, Megan faltered. Without missing a beat, I pressed on. Ever since I got married, you've been incessantly asking about Ben's salary and bonuses. Even our parents had to calm you down when you wouldn't stop. I thought maybe you were just concerned about my financial well-being. But you never stopped talking about money. Is that why you're still not married? Megan stood up, her face flushed. Saying not married yet was the most effective provocation for her, who was anxious about marriage. She spoke even faster than before. Don't get cocky just because you and your child aren't as cute as me. How far do you plan to go to interfere with me? But you heard it from Ben just now, didn't you? He hates you too. So, if you were gone, everything would be resolved. Don't you think it'd be sad for your child to have only one parent? I'll raise her much better than you ever could, so hand her over. Megan marched towards me, trying to grab me. I had always cowered before her bluster, but today was different. With a sharp smack, Megan staggered backward. Her cheek reddening on the opposite side she had held before. Enough with insulting my daughter. She's not some object. If you want custody that badly, we can settle it in court. My feelings for this child are not as tainted as yours. Don't compare us. My mother and mother-in-law calmed me down from either side. Protected by our parents. My daughter and I decided to go back to my parents' home for the time being. Ben sat on the floor in a daze, and Megan, tired from her rant, just glared silently as we headed for the door. We said our goodbyes to my in-laws in the parking lot. We're on your side, Kelly. It's going to be tough, so feel free to ask us for anything. Holding back tears, I deeply bowed to my in-laws, grateful for their support. Weeks passed, and time seemed to crawl until the court delivered the verdict. Despite cutting off my husband and sister, the fear of being separated from my daughter lingered. The divorce was finalized due to the evidence from the baby monitor. And I was awarded custody. Through a lawyer, I also ensured that Ben and Megan would start paying child support and compensation next month. Ben had taken over the repayment of a student loan that my in-laws had been covering. Overwhelmed by the sudden financial responsibility, he called to complain. But I politely told him never to contact me again and cut off all communication. Megan also called to complain about the compensation. So I politely suggested she discuss it with her new husband, Ben. However, Megan, already in conflict with her former husband, who was now sleeping at his office, began harassing his workplace about her compensation. This led to rumors at his company about his unstable ex-wife, causing him embarrassment and eventually his resignation. With no income from her former husband, Megan's relationship with him worsened, and she took on debt. Desperate, she called me, hoping for reconciliation with our parents and financial help. I listened to her plight with a smile but firmly said no. The paperwork for the divorce and move was smoothly handled, with the active help of my parents and in-laws. My daughter, cheered by her loving grandparents, has become even more joyful. Now, as we start our life together, just the two of us, I have no worries. Peaceful days await us, no doubt.